Welcome to Pritesh's kitchen. Today I am going to show you how to make gluten-free breads. This is an extremely simple recipe which doesn't need very expensive or complicated gluten-free flours. So I have an ordinary balance. I'll just take one vessel which can roughly hold 400-450 grams of batter or dough. So now what I'm going to do is I'm taking 250 grams of rice flour. This is simple rice flour which you can find in any shop. If the people you are baking it for are gluten allergic, I would recommend you take a certified one. I just buy the normal one which comes only from a rice flour plant. So it's fairly safe since they don't grind anything else. I have taken 250 grams of just plain rice flour. As I said, there's nothing very complicated about it. I have never, felt the need for anything else. So this is our dry mixture vessel in which I'm going to add all the dry ingredients later. I'll move this out. This is for the liquids. Okay. So now what I have to do is take water, and you need about 160 ml of water, depending on how precise you are in measuring the milk that you have to add. It needn't be any specific kind of milk. I'm just using the normal toned milk that I get for my house. You need anything from 65 to 75 milliliters of milk. I have taken 84 by mistake, which is also okay. The idea is that the total liquid has to add up to 200 grams, not milliliters. I'm sorry, it's grams. I'm measuring everything in grams so that it's independent of cup measurements and spoon measurements and stuff. Okay, so here we go. It is exactly 200 now. Then I'm taking apple cider vinegar. I've just taken what was available easily. There's nothing very special about this particular vinegar. You can take even synthetic vinegar. I prefer to use apple cider. It's more flavorful. So you add just about 1 cupful. It's enough to make buttermilk out of the milk that you have taken. To this, I have to add 45 grams of normal cooking oil. I'm using refined sunflower oil. You don't need anything more complex than that. No butter. If you want, you can use olive oil. I have never felt the need for it. In this, I'm going to break 2 eggs. These are fairly large eggs, roughly 50 grams each. So if you have very small eggs like 28-30 grams, maybe you can use 3. There we go. So this is going to be our liquid mix. As you have added vinegar to this, it's going to look slightly split. Make sure you mix it just by hand. You don't even need the blender for this. Only stir it by hand. There we are. It will begin to look like curdled milk, which it's supposed to. And we set it aside. Now this is the one in which we now have to add things by the teaspoon. So I'm taking around half teaspoon salt. Normally I use 1 teaspoon in it if I'm making a savory bread. Today's bread is sweet. So under normal circumstances, I would have used just about 1.5 tablespoon sugar or something. But since I am making a sweet bread, I'm going to be using around, I'm just roughly measuring, adjust it according to your taste, around 3 full tablespoons of white sugar. You can completely substitute it with brown, but I have observed that it doesn't rise very well. So I prefer to use part brown, part white. to make it rise properly. Feel free, try, experiment, see what works for you. I've added 3 of white. I'm going to add 3 of brown. You can similarly make a cinnamon bread also. That tastes very good as well. So as you noticed, 3 tablespoons of white sugar, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. Once these are added, I'm taking my yeast, which is dry instant yeast. I don't know how to use dry active yeast. You might have to figure out on your own. Take roughly 1 3/4 of a teaspoon. Now this is an important component of making gluten-free breads, which is xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is the binder, which is a substitute of gluten in case of gluten-free flours. I'm taking 1.5 teaspoons of this. This is more than enough to bind the entire thing. Now when I make the savory breads, I love to add all kinds of seeds into it because seeds are gluten-free and packed with nutrition. You can use roasted flax, roasted sesame, sunflower, watermelon, muskmelon. Just feel free, try and experiment with what you like. And now I'm generously adding choco chips in it because my son loves to eat vanilla choco chip combination. Now taking a dry spoon, I'm going to mix it to make sure that both the yeast and more importantly xanthan gum are present in the dough throughout. If xanthan gum is not mixed thoroughly, it tends to form lumps. Try to avoid them. That makes the bread very unstable. Some parts will be dense and some parts become so airy that they collapse on themselves. So as you can see, I'm just dry mixing it. There's nothing very special. If you want, you can do it with blender, but it's not really necessary. There, it's just mixed together. There you go. And I've sort of made a well in the center. That is where I'll be pouring my liquid. And my liquid mix is ready here. For this step, I prefer to use my blender, but you can do it by hand as well. It is not necessary that you have to use a blender in this, but it's very convenient if you are using one. There you go. This is my dough hook attachment. Please don't mind my dirty blender. It gets used so much and I barely ever get to clean it. So as you can see, now the chips are also uniformly distributed throughout my batter. In the dough, I won't get a chance to mix these later. They tend to fall out of the dough. So be careful that you do it before. Now I once again stir my liquid. Make sure it's completely swirled before you just add. Simply add. There is nothing complex or worth remembering here. Add the things together. To avoid a rice flour storm, just manually stir everything together. Just plain mixing. As you can see, the dough begins to become sticky. That is the desired consistency. So right now, all the rice flour has become wet, but it's not yet completely activated. That is, xanthan gum has not yet functioned. So what I do is, I start mixing slowly. Now notice that it's begun to come into the center, which is a right stage to happen. We are somewhere midway on our path to making the sticky cohesive dough. Cohesion means the dough sticks together with itself. That is the stage you have to wait for. As you can see, it's not even sticky anymore. Okay, it comes together in the center. That is just the right path to go about. There we go. I'm stirring it a bit more to keep the lump completely together. There we go. Our dough is ready. Here we are. I'm just wiping off the dough from the hook and bringing it all together. As you can see, it doesn't even stick to your vessel that you were using. Here, it should begin to look a bit like choco-chip cookie dough. There we are. Now we'll get the tin ready and put the dough in. In a sweet bread, there's one crucial step I forgot. That is to add vanilla essence to give that nice fragrant bread which would call you to itself. So let me do that. Since this is a gluten-free flour, you don't have to worry about the dough becoming too sticky or over mixed. It is okay. So I'm just taking about 2 cupfuls. It is about 1.5 teaspoons. That's more than enough. This you can adjust according to how you like it. My son is a huge fan of vanilla, so I'm adding a bit extra. Just make sure you mix it thoroughly in the dough. It looks nice and mixed to me. So I am going to clear out my hook attachment. There we go. Now I've just added about half a spoon of oil to this edge of my baking tin, because that's where my baking paper cannot reach, and to this edge as well. So try not to use butter paper or parchment paper, because that gets stuck to the bread and doesn't come off. Okay. Now I've sort of centered it here. Now this part is a bit messy, but it's worth it. Make sure your hands are nice and completely clean before you get here. There we are. What I'm doing is I am making my hands wet with water. Oil somehow does not work that well with a gluten-free dough, but water works better. So now all that I'm doing is dropping the dough into the pan. And remember, it is on top of the baking paper. Make sure that your baking paper is wide or tall enough to get to the edges that aren't greased. It almost completely comes off. And there we go. Now for those who want to know whether I know the eggless recipe of this, I have tried, but the results haven't been that great, honestly. So I'm just going to pour some water in a bowl, dip my fingers in it and press the dough down. As you can see, it's a very obedient dough. It just goes right down like that, and the sides are greased anyway. This is looking much better than my usual gluten-free dough. Okay, so you can see I'm trying to flatten it out. As I said, since this is not a cohesive dough by itself, It needs a bit of an assistance from xanthan gum, and xanthan gum works better the wetter it is. So the surface will be nice and flat once you are done with this. Now, by the time you are at this stage, your oven can probably be started already. I am going to bake this at 200 degrees centigrade, which I don't know translates to what degree Fahrenheit. So I think you can easily Google it up. So I bake it at 200 for around 20 minutes. This bread bakes faster than the wheat dough bread, which needs around 27 to 30 minutes per half cycle. So I set a timer of 20 minutes. After 20 minutes are over, I cover it loosely with a foil tent. Okay, make sure it's not touching the bread, because the foil is not good if it is touching your food while it is being cooked. So as you can see, it has completely been flattened. Now this isn't enough for the gluten-free bread surface to remain smooth, simply because it just tends to crack open as the flour doesn't bind. So you can skip this step if you want. I prefer to do it because I eat egg and chicken and everything. I am a non-vegetarian, so it works very well for me. I just take an egg, crack it open, and now I'm taking my silicone brush. I'm actually picking only the white. It's not necessary that you include the yolk in this. You can if you want to, but I have found that white is enough. It gives a very nice browning on the top surface. So you can see that it's formed a nice layer on top of the bread. Once you can see a glassy sort of coat on top of everything. It's optional, but you can sprinkle, choco chips on top of it to give it that extra sweetness factor, which I said I like to do for my son, as he's recently been asked to go on gluten-free diet and he misses all the yummy goodies that are available. I want to make sure that he is not missing all the treats that kids his age usually eat. So I am making sure that I'm slightly burying the choco chips in, otherwise they can fall out. So this way I'm making sure that they are getting buried in the egg wash. Some few more. Now I'm no longer putting my hand into the choco chip packet because it's sticky from touching the egg. I'm making sure all the choco chips are sort of buried into the egg wash, and there we are. Now regular breads that I make with wheat flour need about 25 to 45 minutes of proofing depending on weather. On an average, you can assume that the gluten-free breads are going to need double the time. That has been my experience. There is yeast in it which will start acting pretty soon, and there's plenty of sugar. I can already see a slight rise. So you can safely now set a timer of about 30-35 minutes and allow it to rise. It's not going to go double in volume, so please don't even wait for that. It doesn't happen. This doesn't rise that much. It'll rise just about till the level of the tin, or maybe slightly higher if you're lucky or the weather is warm. Once that stage has been attained, you just put it into 200 degrees centigrade preheated oven. Let it bake for 20 minutes. After that, make a foil tent which is not touching the bread and cook for another 20 minutes. This much baking usually is enough for gluten-free breads. As I said earlier, they bake faster. So make sure you're around to do the foil tent step. The reason I don't do it from the beginning is I don't get a nice brown crust if I cover it right from the beginning. It does get cooked, but it looks very undercooked. So sometimes it can be very unappetizing to see a bread like that, which looks just too white, or it is quite white. So what you can do is, set your timer, finish other things, come back, keep the foil tin ready, just plop it right over your bread tin, and voila, that's all. You are ready to start baking it. Now I shall come back after this bread is ready for putting into the oven,